Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I've been listening intently to this debate back and forth on both sides of this issue, the significant policy change that we are considering here for paid family medical leave. And I believe that there is support on both sides of the aisle for the concept. It is in the implementation where we differ and substantially. And I base this, as we look at, we've heard a lot about the study that was done that became the basis for this effort. And when I look at studies, and Representative Zullo earlier talked about, kind of the challenge with polling and studies, and when you don't look at, in particular, studies, what the premise was and what the basis was, how the analysis was performed, what the conclusions were. In this case, this particular study and paper, what references were chosen. And we heard through this debate, through this entire session, as well as it in today, that we are the only country in the world, with the exception of Papua New Guinea, that doesn't have paid family leave or the equivalent. And I would argue that we need to be careful when we look at International Health Organization, UN, and World Health Organization studies, because they look at the United States as a country like every other country in the world, and we are not that. We are a representative republic. We are 50 sovereign states that make up the country. We do not have federal laws that match and mirror the laws in other countries. So it's really an apples to oranges comparison in this way. If you went across the individual 50 states, I would gather, if not all, the great majority of those states have some type of short-term disability, some type of program that covers things like pregnancy, as an example. So if you did an apples-to-apples comparison, you wouldn't be saying that the United States is out of line with the rest of the world. You would be saying that Papua New Guinea is the only country in the world that has nothing. And then if you look at the premise of the plan, and generally the structure that's being proposed here is most closely modeled on the payout and the requirements from Massachusetts, a program that isn't even implemented yet. When we look at the three states that have been around the longest, California, New Jersey, and Rhode Island, and we look at just the family leave portion of theirs, and the reason that's an important distinction is each one of those states had an established, mandated insurance program. In the state of California, where I grew up, they've had state disability insurance for over 50 years. And what they did a little over a decade ago was add family medical leave as a module or an option under their existing state disability. But when we look at the payout and the requirements, in California, it's 6 weeks. The payout is 55%, and it's a cap of a little over $1,100, and they have a 0.9% of wages up to about $106,000. In New Jersey, similarly, 6 weeks, 66% of wages capped at just over $600 a week, 0.2% of wages, but only up to $32,600 of income. And finally, Rhode Island, 4 weeks, 60% of wages, just under $800 a week cap, and they take 1.2% of wages up to $66,300. And then we look at what we're doing in Connecticut, which I say is most closely modeled on the proposed plan in Massachusetts, which hasn't even been implemented. And we're talking about 95% of wage replacement up to a threshold, and then 60% above that, 12 weeks of payout, and 0.5% of wages. You look at those numbers compared to the long-standing and successful programs across the country, and they don't even match up. And finally, the assumption that everybody's using in order to get the financial viability of this program is that not everybody's going to use it. And in that study, it says that the assumptions were for own health, only 55% would use it. For maternity, 99%, which makes sense. New child bonding, 80%, which also makes sense. Then you go into family care for children, spouse, and parents, it's between 10 and 15%. So when you look at that, the assumption on financial viability is I'm going to take money from everybody with the assumption that not everybody will use it, and that's how you're going to maintain financial viability. Now, why is that important? Well, if I look at the other two mandated payroll deduction programs run by a government entity, I have Social Security, created in 1935. Everybody pays in 6.2% of their income. The employer matches 6.2%. Medicare, created in 1965, and that one that you pay in 1.45% of your payroll. Now, why is that significant? Both those programs, everybody pays in and everybody benefits. It's built into the system. With this program, we are having everybody pay in, and we are counting on the significant majority of those people that are paying into it, not using it, in order to make it financially viable. That's the basis of the analysis, and that's why it's important to understand the basis of the study. And if the study is flawed, then the program we are creating based on that study also is flawed because of the assumptions. And then we look at startup costs. Another part of this study, we look at what is in this study and the basis that became the startup costs for the state of Connecticut. They looked at 3 states, Colorado, Massachusetts, and Nebraska. None of those programs are effectively running right now. Colorado recently changed their program to a study, a task force. Massachusetts just issued their regulations in January. They don't even know what the startup cost is. They just issued the RFP within the last month. And Nebraska is similar. But we're basing numbers, and we're telling the public what it's going to cost based on programs that don't exist. Another flaw in the basis of this study. And I think the debate that has happened today has pointed out a lot of these problems in what is being proposed. It is not sustainable at any level. And how do we propose to remedy that we know it's not sustainable, is we will reduce the benefit. Now, the other option, which was in one proposal early on, would be to increase the payroll reduction withholding, or we could flip it and have the employer contribute a part of it, which is what a number of states are doing as well. The challenge with all those is if you thought it was going to be financially solvent legitimately, you wouldn't need all those caveats. And because we're doing this from scratch, which no other state has successfully done, we are an outlier. We are also giving greater benefit than any other state has ever done. Another outlier. You don't want to be outliers when you're dealing with public money, and that's effectively what you're doing here, because yes, the people will be paying in the payroll deduction, but you're going to take that and fund positions in state government with that money. Effectively taking money out of people's paychecks to pay employees in the state government to administer a program. And I don't believe that that is the proper way to enact policy. And with that, Mr. Speaker, the clerk is in possession of amendment LCO number 10335. I ask the clerk to call the amendment and leave the chamber to summarize.
Will the clerk please call LCO 10335, which will be designated House Amendment Schedule A.
LCO number 10335, designated House Amendment Schedule A, and offered by Representatives Claridis, Candelora, O'Day, O'Neill, and France.
The representative seeks leave of the chamber to summarize the amendment. Is there objection to summarization? Is there objection? Hearing none. Representative France, you may proceed with summarization.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And this is a relatively simple adoption. It does strike much of the bill. It's essentially taking a mandate and a payroll deduction and creating a free market solution and empowering the insurance commissioner to create regulations to allow this to happen in the state of Connecticut. So for those that don't know, the insurance commissioner can't just dream up a new insurance product and play it on the market. We in the legislature have to give that authority to them. So in Section 1 of the bill, it establishes or directs the insurance commissioner to establish the standards and regulations for implementing both individual and group short-term disability and family leave income protection coverage. In Section 2, it looks to direct the insurance commissioner to adopt the requirements if we can find another state that already has a program, say like the state of New York as an example, and if the state of New York would allow people who are not residents of that state, or we can enter an agreement to be able to purchase into their existing program, then we would expand our base in that. So that is in Section 2, creating that opportunity. And then Section 3, it allows, upon written request of the employee, the ability to cost share the cost. And why is that important? It's really modeled loosely on your health insurance, which is usually cost share between an employer and employee. Because even with a small employer, they may want to offer this benefit to their employees because it allows them to buy into the group market at a substantial discount over the individual market. And finally, in sections 4 through 8, I believe it is, 4 through 8, that is the definition of family that mirrors the expansion that has been proposed in the existing bill, with the exception that instead of having the person with an affinity, loosely a family member, we look at the most likely person that would fill that would be a spouse-like relationship. So if you have a couple that is in cohabitation, since we do not have common law marriage in the state of Connecticut, it allows these spouse-like relationships to be included. So that is the most likely case of an affinity that we thought was there. So that we believe is the thing. So we've expanded it, mirroring the proposal from the other side, from the proponent of grandparent, grandchild, sibling, but instead of the family member or the like a family member with the affinity definition, it is a spousal type relationship or cohabitation. Move adoption, and Mr. Speaker, request a roll call vote on the vote.
When the vote is taken, be taken by roll. Representative Porter.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just wanted to say that when the roll call is presented, that I would ask that my colleagues please vote no on this. I am not in support of this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Porter. So it looks to be 61 names on the board. So if you were on there already and you'd like to speak on the amendment, we'll start with Representative Yacarino and then Strzynski. After that, if you want to speak, just raise your hand and I will be happy to call on you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good night. It's been a long day and a long debate. Before I speak, I'm speaking in favor of the amendment. Is it all right if I just comment on the existing?
We're speaking on the amendment
Okay.
that Representative France called now, so it's
All right.
that's what's appropriate.
First of all, I want to ask the proponent some questions. Before I ask the proponent some questions, I'd like to speak on his amendment then.
Absolutely.
So
Please
unlike
proceed.
the bill we've been discussing all day, is this, it's an option. Is that, through you, Mr. Speaker?
Representative France.
Thank you for the question. Yes, it is an option. It's not a mandate. It essentially directs the insurance commissioner to create the regulations that then would allow the market, though the individual insurance companies could then offer their programs through the insurance commissioner for approval. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Yacarino.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that answer. So we would have to get approval from the Connecticut Insurance Commission, and then we would have to find a provider. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative France.
Yeah, I think for the question, essentially the process would be, if this became law, then the insurance commissioner would have to create the regulations, and then that would then be an opportunity for the market. So any insurance company then could come and provide a plan that complies with whatever regulations the insurance commissioner deems appropriate. And once they're approved, then that insurance company could offer that product on both the individual and group market, as described in Section 1 of the amendment. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Yacarino.
Thank you for that answer. And in Connecticut, we have the Hartford and other insurance companies. I know, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Speaker, or through the proponent, the Hartford, do they administer paid family medical leave in the states of New York? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative France.
That is correct. And my understanding is that Hartford provides the insurance coverage in the state of New York for a portion of this unpaid family leave for the state of New York, and they may offer it in other states as well. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you.
Representative Yacarino.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Where we've heard, like, we have Medicare, which we all pay into, Social Security, which are great programs we all pay into, but we all do receive those benefits someday. And where the underlying bill is laudable, and I think it's important, but I also think it's important for people to make their their decisions on what they can afford and what they want in their life. And I think with the Hartford or an insurance company like that administers our insurance now, or in New York State and other states, they've done it. They know that they have filings, they have consumer protection, they're part of the free market. They've done this for many, many years. I think the Hartford has been doing it for over 75 years. So I would prefer, for me, and I have a small business, and I treat my employees really well, and if they're out, we work together, and I pay them, and I'm able to do that. Somebody picks up the load. But in some cases, people just don't want to participate, and you shouldn't mandate that they would participate. So under this plan, I think it makes more sense where you could buy a policy, what you'd like, and through you, Mr. Speaker, are there different levels of policies potentially through you, Mr. Speaker? So if I want to have 6 weeks off, or I want to have 8 weeks off, are there potentially different policies through you, Mr. Speaker?
Representative France.
And I thank you for that question. It really gets to the heart of what are the potential options. Now, while we don't specify what the insurance commission regulations or what the insurance companies would offer, there is potential for having different levels of coverage. You could potentially, an insurance company could potentially offer, 3 levels of definition of family. They could offer the current definition at the federal level under the Family Medical Leave Act, which is very narrowly defined. They could offer a mid-tier that encompasses the existing state definition of family, and then a top-tier plan that would include the expansion that's defined in this proposal. In addition, you could have elimination periods and benefit periods that would range, and you could then choose, much like you do in a cafeteria-style insurance plan for medical insurance, you make some choices depending on what your company offers or what you want to buy in the individual market. You get a price, and you look at the coverage and the price, and you weigh that on your own merits, and you decide whether the value is there, and then you potentially make other changes. So in this case, an elimination period is the time between the onset of the criteria to engage payout and the time you would get payout. Typically for short-term disability, which this is modeled on, it is a 7-day elimination period for illness or something of that nature. An injury is generally a 0 day, so you'd get it on day 1. And the maximum benefit period, if we're being prudent, would be much like what the proponents have brought forward in the original bill, underlying bill, is to cap it at 12 weeks, since that's the length of time that the federal government protects it. Or you could do it under the 16 weeks over 2 years that is in the state law. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you.
Representative Iaccarino.
Thank you for that answer. I know Anthem and the larger companies are providing short-term disability on top of their PTO and their vacation time. And this, I think, I'll wrap it up. To me, as much as the other policy's laudable, I don't think it's solvent. I don't think the 0.5% or even 1% would ever be solvent. I think with the free market, with an experienced company where you choose to opt in or opt out, it's more logical to me. And as much, like I said, as much as it's laudable, I think we'll be back in a year or two raising rates or cutting the program, or the program will never come to an existence potentially. And that's a bad thing when people are expecting that and they pay into it. So I would prefer the private plan, so you could opt in and have that opportunity. So I support the amendment, and hopefully everybody else will. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And thank you for bringing it forth.
Thank you. A remark further on the amendment before us. Representative Straczynski. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of this amendment because I believe in compromise. I understand what the chair of the Labor Committee is trying to do, and I respect that. I really do. But the underlying bill, in my opinion, is too unwieldy, it's too large, it's too expensive, and it's too unfriendly to our businesses here in the state. I have several major concerns with the underlying bill, including covering employers down to 1 employee, having all employees pay in with a new payroll tax, including all expansions, including the close association, requiring the additional hiring of Department of Labor staff, talking up to $1 million in costs on an annual basis, and the startup cost of nearly $14 million, all of which are very concerning to me. So I want to thank the proponent of the amendment, and I do have a few questions for him, if I may, through you, Mr. Speaker.
Of course you may. Please proceed, sir. Representative France, please prepare yourself.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Looking through the bill, in lines 4, it says that the insurance commissioner shall adopt these regulations before July 1st of 2020. Is that enough time through you, Mr. Speaker?
Representative France.
Thank you for the question. And while the insurance commissioner has not weighed in specifically on that, given that there are existing programs across the country, both at the state level as well as private options such as AFLAC, I think the insurance commissioner could come up with the regulations. It's a fairly straightforward prescription. They already have examples and regulations related to specifically to short-term disability. So expanding it into the definition of family medical leave should be a fairly easy task and should be plenty of time by July 1st, 2023, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Straczynski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the answer to that question. I think it does make sense. A lot of times in this chamber, we'll see dates put into legislation that, frankly, just seem outrageous. Putting together a task force of 30-plus people within a month doesn't make a lot of sense. But I do believe that the year plus to get this done is a reasonable amount. The reason I asked the question was just to get some clarification and to also ensure that that was discussed. Given the fact that this would go and be adopted on July 1st, 2020, does that mean the implementation of the program would begin on that same date through you, Mr. Speaker?
Representative France.
Thank you for that question. And the strict answer would be, while it would be available, it is unlikely that if on July 1st, 2020 was the date that the insurance commissioner adopted the regulations and published them, it would be sometime after that before a particular insurance company would craft their product. I would imagine there would be consultation between the insurance commissioner and the individual insurance companies, but until the final regulations are adopted, it would be unlikely that an individual insurance company would offer the final product. So sometime after that would be a period of time when insurance companies would start to offer their plans for review and approval by the insurance commissioner. And certainly it would not likely be much after that, since obviously the first one to the market has an advantage. So I would expect it to be relatively shortly after that. And as I understand the process the insurance commissioner uses, he or she's in consult with the insurance companies to ensure as they bring these regulations out, they are not cumbersome and burdensome on the company and actually achievable for whatever the final goal is. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Straczynski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'm glad to hear that. The reason I bring that up is because the underlying bill begins in January or February of 2022. Does the proponent of this amendment believe that this amendment would actually provide for an expanded program of paid family medical leave before the underlying bill? Through you.
Representative France.
And I thank you for that question. While I can't make any guarantee, given the timeline and the expected market driving factor, I would expect it would be substantially sooner. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Straczynski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just want to make sure I'm clear on that. He did say that it would be shortly after July 1st, 2020, so that would give it almost 18 months past that where the underlying bill would go into effect. So would there be any reason why we shouldn't expect that this amendment would actually take effect sooner than the underlying bill? Through you.
Representative France.
And I thank you for that question. And I do believe that given the market forces and, as I said, the driving factor of the first one to market, there would be very shortly after July 1st, 2020, you would have the product available both on the individual and group market. And I would expect that employers who want to retain their employees who already offer short-term disability would include family medical leave as an option through their group programs. And the individual market would be available almost immediately. So anybody could take advantage of that if they so chose and they had the need for this particular type of insurance product. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Straczynski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the answers. Given the speculative nature of my questions, obviously I don't expect a proponent of the amendment, unless he is the Commissioner of Insurance, to determine when exactly this would be available or when exactly the program would be adopted. But I'm just trying to get an idea of the differences between the amendment as proposed and the underlying bill. And I think it's important to note that this has the strong potential of actually expanding family medical leave earlier than the underlying bill. And like I said in my introduction, the underlying bill is a very unwieldy, large, expensive program, which this one is not. And I think it gives good reason for the chamber to support it. But taking a deeper dive into the bill, Lines 8 through 9 states, any such regulations shall prohibit pregnancy from being considered a pre-existing condition. Through you, Mr. Speaker, why was this line included in the bill amendment?
I think Representative France is having a difficult time hearing the questions, so thank you for quieting down, Representative France.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And the reason that this was included is that if a woman who happens to be pregnant transitions jobs between, during pregnancy, we did not want the new employer to be able to exclude just because of a job transfer, assuming that the coverage is maintained, she would still be covered. We wanted to ensure that we were explicit to ensure that, as I said, a pregnant female who happened to change jobs during the pregnancy would not be excluded. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Straczynski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sometimes in the chamber you ask questions that you know the answers to already. I can honestly say I did not know the answer to that question before I asked it. I appreciate the representative for answering it. It does make a lot of sense, especially since one of the main reasons to take this leave is to care for a newborn child. So it does make a lot of sense. In lines 12 through 21, it discusses the facilitation of the ability of Connecticut employers and Connecticut residents to purchase short-term disability that are offered in or by other states. Can the good representative explain what language this refers to and how this would work? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative France.
Thank you for that question, because this is something that is central to providing a cost-effective program, is that if there is a program such as the state of New York or even Rhode Island, our neighbors, that is either offers now an ability for people who are non-residents to buy into the program, or the insurance commissioner negotiates with the equivalent position in either of the states that already have a program and can negotiate a deal to expand that base, it would offer immediately a benefit to the residents of the state of Connecticut with an expanded pool. Certainly the state of New York has substantially more residents and people that are covered under their state disability insurance and family medical leave program, and it would allow all the residents of the state of Connecticut to buy directly into a state-run program that has a long track record and would be substantially reduced cost to the residents of the state of Connecticut. And it is a benefit. We wanted to make sure we included that to give the direction to the insurance commissioner to attempt to build up a relationship with these other states that already have existing programs, as opposed to creating one from scratch that may or may not be solvent just based on the limited resources of the state of Connecticut. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Straczynski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Reducing costs. I like the sound of that. Are there any other states other than the ones he mentioned that provide this kind of coverage to different out-of-state residents? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative France.
I thank you for the question. I'm not aware that any of the states offer outside state. We didn't go into looking at the individual states. We do know that a number of states across the country provide this opportunity for family leave. As I talked in my opening, the states of California, New Jersey, and Rhode Island have had programs established for a number of years. Massachusetts, Washington, Nebraska, and Colorado have programs that have been started in their infancy or not quite yet established. But by giving the insurance commissioner direction from this body to explore those options, it gives the potential to have that opportunity available to the residents of the state of Connecticut. If we did not include that, the insurance commissioner wouldn't have the authority to even have the conversation with another state to try and build up a memorandum of understanding or agreement with that other state to potentially offer that benefit to the residents of the state of Connecticut. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Straczynski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman for his answer. It makes a lot of sense, and I like the fact that we're empowering the insurance commissioner to do this. Speaking of empowering people, Section 3, line 22 through 25, discusses that an employee will have his or her wages deducted for the insurance only if they opt in. So through you, Mr. Speaker, just to confirm, this isn't an automatic mandatory payroll tax program through you?
Representative France.
Thank you for the question, and it's important to understand, the answer is no, it is not a mandate, it is not a payroll deduction. But in order for an employer to be able to offer this short-term disability module, if you will, under family medical leave, there are essentially three options that employer has. They can fully fund it, like many larger companies do with short-term disability. It could be a cost share between the employer and the employee, which is how many companies do health insurance currently. Or a small business, they may not be able to afford to give this benefit and pay for this benefit, could offer the benefit as an option to the employee, which allows the employee to buy into the group market directly. So a small business, maybe the McDonald's franchisees, they belong to a consortium within the state of Connecticut, and that those franchisees could band together in the state of Connecticut and offer it, because of the number of employees, as a group product, which then would allow the individual employee to buy into it at the group rate, which is substantially less than the individual rate. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Straczynski, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I really do appreciate the answer to that question, because I think that's one of the goals that this chamber as a whole is trying to get to. We understand the majority party who has brought out this concept, Senate Bill 1, to provide the opportunity for residents to have that family medical leave. We've also heard from members on my side of the aisle who have said that they support the concept of family medical leave. It's just that this program, the way it's worded, is too much. So I think this, as I said in my opening, strikes a perfect compromise. This is a program that allows for this to happen without forcing every single employee, other than state and municipal workers, to pay into the program. This is an excellent compromise, and I think this should be really considered and thought about as we move forward. Clearly, insurance systems work to the point where they need to have a number of people pay in, and not everyone will receive those benefits. So having the opportunity to say, yes, I want this program, or have employees go to their employer and say, you should offer this program, it would help me decide on where I should work or where I'm going to work, I think is very important. And it allows for choice. It allows for freedom. It allows for employees to make that decision on their own. Moving on to the bill, in lines 32, the eligible employee is defined in several ways, and line 32 states at least 1,000 hours of service with such employer during the last 12-month period. And I believe this is current state law. But just to confirm to the proponent of the amendment, this is 25 weeks or roughly 6 months at 40 hours a week. Is that correct? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative France.
Thank you for the question. That it is confirmed. It is current law under the existing family medical leave, and yes, that would be approximately 6 months at a full-time rate of 40 hours a week. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Straczynski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And what if someone were to work overtime? If they were to work, say, an average of 60 hours per week, would they have to work 6 months, or would that be a shorter time frame as long as they were employed in a 12-month period? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative France.
Thank you for the question. For clarity, it is specified 1,000 hours. So however fast you get to 1,000 hours, whether that's at 40 hours a week or 60 hours a week, is when you reach that threshold of 1,000 hours, not a particular duration that is accounted for in here. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Straczynski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And what if the employee, in their need to take some time off, utilized vacation, sick, personal time, comp time, did swaps with other employees? Would that factor into this in any way? Through you, Mr. Speaker?
Representative France.
Thank you for the question, and the short answer is no. That would be outside of this. They can do that today. That they, if they have sick time, they have paid time off, depending on what their employee offers. Some employers even offer some form of family medical leave in their benefit package. That would be completely outside of this this package. And if the individual employee felt that they had sufficient coverage under the existing plans that they have in time, they wouldn't even purchase this product. So it gives the freedom to do that. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Straczynski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In line 39, I noticed that the threshold for the business size or number of employees was kept at 75 or more. I think this is a very important part of this amendment because, as we know, the underlying bill eliminates it down to 1 employee or more. Through you to the proponent of the amendment, what was the thought on keeping it at 75, Mr. Speaker?
Representative France.
And I thank you for the question, and it's a clarification that I didn't make clear on my outset. The definition of family medical leave is in section 3151 KK through 3151 RR of the Connecticut General Statutes, and that defines family medical leave. And we retain the unpaid version of family medical leave the same as it is today, with 75 employee threshold and 16 weeks over 2 years. What we did in the opening 3 sections was empower the insurance commissioner to create a product without that limitation of employee size. So they could offer that down to a single employee, hence the individual market. But we retained the unpaid portion the same as it was. And that is also, I think, an unintended consequence of the underlying bill, is that by changing the definition in 3151 KK through RR and making it paid, that also affects unpaid, which means that an employee could decide that every Friday they want to take off unpaid, and under the change in law, the unintended consequence is that the change in the underlying bill does not just account for paid family medical leave, but it also makes changes to unpaid. And when we proposed this amendment, we wanted to ensure that the unpaid remained unchanged and only offered a change to the paid portion of family medical leave. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Straczynski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I noticed that there is an expansion in the current family in this amendment. So through you to the proponent of the amendment, notice grandchildren, grandparents, and siblings were added. Through you, what was the thought behind that? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative France.
Thank you for the question. And what that really was is looking at what was proposed in the original language in the bill was to say, if we want to expand the definition of family, that's fine. We weren't going to get into a debate on what is family, what is not. And so to align with the intent and the specificity, honestly, with the proposal that came out that from the majority and the proponent, grandchild, grandparent, as well as sibling was added to conform with the existing language. And as I said in my opening, the only change we made to the family definition is instead of giving the opening of an individual who we think of like a family member, that it would be very difficult to regulate in the proposal that has been made, we looked at what is the most likely non-familial blood relationship or legal bond would be the cohabitation or spouse-like relationship that exists in some relationships and cohabitation. So that was really what we tried to do, was try to align with the expansion that was proposed in the original amendment, original concept, and we'll go along with that. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Straczynski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the representative for such a thorough answer. It is very much appreciated. Moving on through lines 268 through roughly 278, it discusses the certifications of health event. Through you, Mr. Speaker, are there any changes under existing law that occur in this amendment? Through you.
Representative France.
Thank you for the question. And other than adding the changes in the definition of family, there is no other change related to existing law. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Straczynski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman for his confirmation. I think that's very important to realize as we consider this amendment, because we are continuing the practices that we have under the current family medical leave that exists today and expanding it to more people, including grandparents, grandchildren, siblings, spousal type relationships, and cohabitation. And we're also leaving the certification policy as it is. It keeps the regulation that you have to work 12 months and at least 1,000 hours, which is current law. The current amendment, as we have today, would allow for employees and employers to choose whether or not they want to provide this coverage. And more than anything else, as we prepare in the next few days to deliberate on our state budget, This amendment has no cost to the state. Let me repeat that to be very clear. This amendment has no cost to the state, and there is no direct payroll tax. There is no expansion to a vague or unknown relationship type. This, in my opinion, is exactly the compromise that the state of Connecticut needs. This shows that there are colleagues in this room that we support family medical leave. We understand the burdens that families face. We know what it's like to take care of a newborn child, a sick family member, an aging parent, a sibling who's fallen on hard times, whatever it may be. But we also have to balance that against what we can afford as a state. We should be asking ourselves the question, can we afford this underlying bill? And if my colleagues in this chamber can honestly say that we can afford a $14 million startup cost, $1 million extra in the Department of Labor, and to further burden every employee in the state with a 0.5% payroll tax, then I guess your choice is made and you can vote for it. But I know there are many in this chamber who feel this is expensive. It's too burdensome. And we can do better. And I think this amendment strikes that balance. I think this amendment strikes that compromise. I want to thank the good proponent of the amendment, and I urge my colleagues to support it. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative. As I stated before, we're on the amendment. There are quite a few names on the board. If you would like to speak on the amendment, please raise your hand. Representative Ferraro, on the amendment.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, and I hope that I still will be able to speak on the underlying bill as well. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Please proceed, sir.
To the proponent of the amendment, I would just like to thank him for his hard work and effort in bringing this amendment forward. I rise in full support of the amendment for the many of the reasons the previous speaker and my colleague has brought forward. Most importantly, I'm a big proponent of giving the choice to our consumers. And with that in mind, I'd just like to ask the proponent of the amendment a couple of questions. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Please proceed, sir.
Thank you. To the proponent of the amendment, is it true that this amendment would allow for the insurance commissioner to develop products, plural, that would be tailor-made to specific needs of the consumer? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative France.
Well, thank you for the question. And for clarity, all the insurance commissioner do would be establish the parameters. So, in effect, would create the opportunity for the insurance industry to create the products that the questioner provides. It wouldn't be the insurance commissioner creating the mandate. All they would do is provide the parameters. For example, they would provide the maximum elimination period that they would allow, which, as I said before, is the time between the onset of the criteria to enact payout under the insurance policy. It would be a maximum elimination and benefit period that would be established. And for perspective, if under the insurance commissioner regulations, if it's a short-term disability-like program, which this would fall under, that's less than a year in duration, the current regulation is that it could be no greater than 90-day elimination period for a benefit period up to a year. I would expect that there would be substantially less, but those are what the insurance commissioner will provide is the criteria and regulation that then the insurance industry would model their programs on to offer to the market. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative France. Representative Ferraro, sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I thank the kind gentleman for his answer, and I appreciate his clarification. And once the insurance commissioner gave the opportunity to the insurance industry to create these products, I guess as a small business owner myself, my question would be, would I have the opportunity to purchase a number of products that would fit my needs, fit my ability, affordability, and be able to give my employees the type of weekly compensation that they could afford and give them a variety of products to choose from? Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative France.
And I thank you for the question. And as I said before, the answer would be that the insurance industry, the companies themselves, obviously they want to sell a product. So they would be providing probably many options that employers could take advantage of to offer to their employees. And that, as I said, it could be multiple definitions of family with a base model that is definition based on the federal government law. You could have a mid-tier definition of family that is the current definition within state law in Connecticut. And then you could have a top-tier option of the definition of family that deals with this expanded definition as proposed in the amendment. In addition to that, there could be a different elimination period and different benefit periods that the employer could offer. And it could be offered with great flexibility to the employee to where the employer decides that they will offer up to a maximum of a certain amount of benefit, and they will offer to cost share, say, at a 50%, 50-50 split with the employee, and then the employee would have the flexibility to determine, do I want to have less coverage, understanding that the employer is only going to cover half the cost, as an example. So there's great flexibility with the insurance industry bringing to market products that the employers would want to offer, and there's also the opportunity for greater flexibility for the employee, even within an employer model, to choose a benefit that meets their needs. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative France? No? Ferraro?
Thank you, Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and through you, I do appreciate that answer from the proponent of the amendment. Being a small business owner, having the flexibility to be able to offer programs, different programs to my employees would be very important to me, and I guess it would be even more important to my employee based on their needs. I was also wondering, there are many disability products currently in the market and offered through the insurance industry here in Connecticut. And I was wondering if a program like this could actually be offered as a waiver on an existing disability program. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative France.
Thank you for that question. And the short answer would be likely yes. Once again, I don't speak for the insurance commissioner, but if we look at how states have rolled out programs such as California, they took an existing disability program, state disability insurance program, and added family leave as an option within that program. So given the proponent's intent of the question, I would imagine that the insurance commissioner, after creating the regulations, that the insurance industry, the companies themselves, would look and model family leave on short-term disability since that's the most closely aligned insurance product, and also, as I said, exactly how the states that have brought out programs have modeled it. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Ferraro.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate the answer, and that's exactly the answer I was hoping to hear. And my last question would be, through you, Mr. Speaker, to the proponent. If I had an employee who wished not to be part of a program that would provide compensation for family leave, but was only interested in the current family leave program that the state offers that would protect his job or her job should they leave for 2 or 3 weeks, and they could opt out of the program even though the rest of the employees in my company had that program. Through you to the proponent, would that employee be allowed to opt out? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative France.
And I thank you for the question, and certainly it wouldn't need to opt out because it is an opt-in program, but to the intent of the question, that would be in a model where the employer is offering either a cost share or offering the benefit to the employee for them to fully fund. And in that case, if the employee chose not to participate in either the cost share model or fully paying for the benefit, then they would still be protected under the unpaid model, assuming that they worked for a company that had more than 75 employees under state law, or if they were under a more restricted definition of family, 50 employees under federal law. Through you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Ferraro.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the good gentleman for his answers. Just a general comment. the flexibility offered by the proponent's amendment is very appealing to me as a business owner. I have, over the last 40 years of running a small business, always afforded my employees, if they had an emergency or a family issue and they needed to take time off, I always gave them the time off without question, always paid them, and the objective was they were great employees. I wanted to keep them, and we're basically a family in my small business. We run a martial arts organization. We sweat together, we work together, and we share each other's happiness and share each other's pain. And as a result, it was my pleasure to be able to help them in times of need. But being able to provide a product that has flexibility and gives my employees the ability to pick and choose different products that would serve their needs would be very appealing to me as an employer. So I full-heartedly support the amendment and urge my colleagues to do so as well.
Thank you, Representative, for our care to remark further on the amendment before us. Again, I have many names on the board, so if you'd like to, please raise your hand. I'd be happy to call on you on the amendment. You care to remark further on the amendment? If not, we'll... Representative France, I'm sorry. Please proceed, sir.
Thank you for that. Just to wrap up, and I want to make the point that, we, as been stated here tonight many times, I think everybody in this chamber wants to be able to provide this benefit. But one of the things that we need to understand as legislators who enact law and provide programs to our residents in the state of Connecticut, we should not do it with the potential that down the road it will be unsustainable, and either one or two things will happen. They'll get a reduced benefit, which is not what we committed to, or you have an increased cost. And I would argue, based on how I opened the conversation and the flaws that are inherent in the study that this is based on, and the fact that we didn't model the programs that are across the states that have been sustained, and we are actually looking at states and modeling on their programs that have not been enacted yet. I have great concern over the program that is being proposed in the bill, and I think that the amendment provides the benefit of family medical leave to those that want it. I think the other challenge I highlighted in the Q&A back and forth is that by changing the way that the bill is proposing, we are also changing unpaid family medical leave, which means that if you have one employee, they can take unpaid family medical leave and just leave at any time as long as they can meet the requirements. And I think that is a reason when you look at why did the federal government establish 50? Why did we in this chamber choose 75? Because we didn't want to negatively impact a small business by having employees be able to just leave and come back with guaranteeing their job and have the employer have no recourse based on that situation. So I think that's a concern as well. I think that is why the amendment is better. It leaves the unpaid portion exactly as it was intended by this body and signed into law. And then we provide a paid option that will be an insurance model that the people can choose if they so need this benefit. We also are looking at some companies in this state already offer this benefit at no cost to their employees. And should those companies choose to maintain that coverage, the employee will have to this 0.5% payroll tax taken out of their pay each payday and get no benefit for it. And that is effectively stealing money from our residents, and that is not appropriate. We should not be establishing programs like that. And as I outlined at the beginning, the financial stability of what's being proposed is based on the fact that this program is not available for everybody. There is no way that everybody could take advantage of this program under the current current pay model. I don't think that's appropriate either. I think it is creating a system where we enact this into law, and 2, 3, 4 years down the road, we are now gave a commitment to our residents, and now we have to figure out a way to pay for it. And we are not in the financial situation in our state. Our economy is not growing the way it should, and we do not have the resources to be able to provide this new benefit. So with that, I urge my colleagues to support the amendment. I think it is a prudent compromise that strikes a balance between wanting to provide a new benefit to our residents that that is requested and demanded by them, but also is prudent in how it is financially paid for and doesn't create a burden on the state with new employees required and an ongoing sustaining process that is a substantial cost that we cannot afford. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative France. Would you care to remark further on the amendment before us? Is there anyone that would care to remark further on the amendment before us? The distinguished minority leader, Representative Claridis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I know the hour is getting late, and you've heard a lot. We've heard a lot from both sides of this issue. I think I just wanted to repeat, and I think it bears repeating, that this is an issue that I've certainly said many times, and I think I speak for most of my colleagues when I say that the concept of paid family medical leave is certainly a good one. But as you've heard me also say many times, there are a lot of good ideas and a lot of good concepts, and there are a lot of things we would love to do if we had the money to do it. And in this building, we see so many people that need our help. We see so many people that are in need and have concerns and worries every day, whether they be the elderly or children or, fill in the blank. So, very similar to a conversation we've had a few times on tolls, there are other options. And I think people should very seriously consider the fact that we can allow people to find things that work best for them. We talk about choice in this building a lot, and giving people their choice and empowering people to know what's best for them, because government certainly doesn't know what's best for them. And I just find the whole notion of a mandatory payroll tax to pay for something that you may never use or have no interest in offensive. I mean, I respect people's opinions on this. I just find it offensive. And the notion that we can, as a state, empower people to make the best choice for them, knowing that a 22-year-old with no family doesn't have the same needs as a 50-year-old with 4 children, is what government should be about. Not about saying, guys, don't worry, you live in this state, but we know what's best for you, while people are struggling to feed their families and pay their mortgage. So, Mr. Speaker, I certainly stand in wholehearted support of this amendment. I think the reason for this is the only reason we should be doing this is because it is not our job as government to tell you we know better than you do about your own needs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Claridis. Would you care to remark further on the amendment before us? Would you care to remark further on the amendment? If not, will staff and guests please come to the well of the House? Members, please take your seats. The machine will be open.
The House of Representatives is voting by roll. Members to the chamber. The House of Representatives is voting by roll. Members to the chamber. The House of Representatives is voting by roll. Members to the chamber.
Have all the members voted? Have all the members voted? Voted. Will the members please check the board to determine if your vote has properly been cast? If all members have voted, the machine... If all the members have voted, the machine will be locked and the clerk will take a tally. Chamber of Stand at ease.
How'd you open it? Hey, Zani, can you close the machine so that I can...
He's going to change his vote.
Right, but they need to...
If all the members have voted, the machine will be locked. The clerk will take a tally. Clerk will please announce the tally.
Hold on. What is this? This is not right. This amendment? Oh, yeah. Okay. House Amendment Schedule A, total number voting 145, necessary for adoption 73, those voting A 61, those voting A 84, absent not voting 6.
The amendment is rejected.